Innovate podcast, where we highlight Canadian innovators who are changing the game. I'm Sapna Malhotra, your proud Canadian host. The Can Innovate podcast is about providing industry insights from Canadian innovators that are doing it. They are really crushing it out there in the industry. These innovators share insightful thought leadership, tips, tricks, tactics that we can all adopt. Plus, they even share their own entrepreneurial tales of successes and failures, and they really show us what we can learn. So let's continue to innovate our own businesses, lives, and careers. And if you know of any Canadian innovators that should be featured, drop us a line. You know I love getting feedback and hearing from everyone. You can contact me via email, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and of course, hint, hint, even in a review. All right, let's get to this episode. We are honored to have Laila Paszti, who is an attorney at the GTC's Mergers and Acquisition, Business and Technology Transactions, and Privacy Groups. She focuses on mergers and acquisitions, privacy, licensing, and other technology-related transactions with an emphasis on software code audits and big data platform diligence. She advises her clients on privacy and security best practice and cross-border transfer of data. Prior to joining GTC, Laila was a member of the IP Technology, Food and Drug Regulatory, and Payment and Cards practice groups at Torys LLP. And before law school, she held positions as software applications engineer, where she designed and implemented machine learning software solutions and to optimize industrial processes. She holds a B.A.Sc in chemical engineering from the University of Toronto, an M.A.Sc in chemical engineering at the University of Waterloo, and a J.D. at the University of Toronto, where she was a law review editor. She is admitted to the practice in New York and Ontario, Canada. Wow, what an impressive bio. Did I miss anything in that introduction?
No, you didn't, Sapna. Thank you very much. It's very kind of you to invite me, and I'm very excited to be on your podcast.
Oh, well, we're excited to have you, especially to talk about blockchain. This is one of the biggest, trends that's running everywhere. And there's so much confusion that's happening between, you got blockchain, the cryptocurrency. Can you give us kind of the 411, the blockchain 101? What exactly is happening and what does it mean?
For sure. I mean, this is something that I'm very passionate about. And I understand that there's a lot of fear out there. I recognize that it's a complex technology. It's hard to distill into something that's, portable and easy to understand, but I'm going to give it my best shot, and here it goes. So I'm going to start off with a short definition, and then I'll try to provide some analogies so that we could tie it to the real world. And then hopefully from there, there's interest and we can try to go through a typical transaction on the blockchain and just see how powerful this is and how this could potentially revolutionize the way we do business. So short definition as promised. So it's basically a shared database with entries that are cryptographically linked. And that gives it's one of its core powers, that it's immutable. It doesn't change. So that's the definition of the database. So how do people come into it? How is it going to transform our lives? And the way it's going to do this, it's going to change the way we interact with the database and the way we do business. So blockchain is a network technology. It'll run over your computer. It'll run over a network of computers where members of the blockchain track and exchange assets directly and securely with each other. And the movement or exchanges of those assets, and those assets can be anything from coins to bushels of produce, are then verified by the members of the network and then recorded in a very, very unalterable, immutable way on the blockchain ledger. And then the last part is that blockchain ledger is shared with all the participating members of the network. So, that sounds all very nice and very powerful. And, I hope there's a sense of the democracy, because I've only spoken about one entity. I've spoken about members. So generally all the members have the same type of power on that network. What is the status quo? And I think when I talk about the status quo right now and how we interact with, databases in business, you'll understand that blockchain is very different. So currently, when we want to track and exchange something, there would be a middleman. So if I wanted to send you, Sapna, $10 and you are going to send me $1, I don't know you and very well, but maybe at the end of this we will. So I need to know that you're going to send me this book. So I'm going to send the money to a middleman. He's going to hold it. He's going to get some sort of verification that you're going to send me this book. And once he gets that verification, he'll release the funds to you. You will ship it to me. And if there's any disputes, this middleman will take care of it. And that adds a lot of complexity to what should be a very simple transaction. And that's where the blockchain comes in, because as I mentioned, it allows members to track and exchange directly and securely. It allows other members to verify. The blockchain will record this transaction immutably. So, I can't go back and say, you know what, I want that $10 back. You can't say that you didn't receive the $10. Once that transaction is recorded, it's sealed. And then everyone in the network can share that. So everyone knows that I have a bag, you have $10. We both look like stars because we've accomplished what we set out to do. We've completed a transaction. And so that's part of the reason why people are so excited about this. And, the other thing is there's a lot of naysayers who would say it's a database. How's it different? And how does this change anything? And to that I say traditional databases are to blockchain what a Word document is to a Google document. And if you're collaborating with a colleague or a person with a Word document, you know that processing changes takes a long time. So the traditional way that we share documents, like Word documents, is, you make your edits, you send your Word document to someone else, you ask them to make revisions to it, and then you wait for them to send them back. So if you had a good idea in the meantime, you're documenting it somewhere else, you wait for the document to come back, you're editing it. So you're locked out of editing until the other person finishes. And to me, that adds some inefficiencies. With a Google document, on the other hand, both parties have access to the document at the same time. And then the single version of that document is always visible to both parties. So it's got some characteristics of the blockchain that I spoke about, visibility, shared, and, it's distributed. So both parties can see it at the same time. So that brings me to another question that I've also had people ask me. So you've got Google Docs, you've got an Excel spreadsheet in Google Docs. You could share that quite easily. And why do we need this complexity and this idea of blockchain? And to that I say, a Google Doc is very similar to blockchain, but it doesn't have some of the core features and the power of the blockchain. So a Google Doc will allow you to track changes, but it won't let you exchange assets. So you won't be able to transfer funds. You're going to record it on your Google Doc, but then you have to go out to another system and actually facilitate the transfer of coins or assets or something like that. And then the other power of the blockchain is security. Blockchain ledger is potentially thousands of copies of the same document across dozens and dozens of servers. So it means if a hacker wanted to corrupt or hack a document, he or she would have to obtain every single copy and simultaneously change it to make sure that it was hacked successfully. And the Bitcoin ledger is hundreds and thousands of computers, so it's pretty impossible to hack. Whereas with a Google Doc, it's quite possible if it's distributed amongst 5 people, some bad actor could edit it and then go even break in and change the audit logs. If there was payoff, they would actually go to the Google server and could potentially hack that and edit the document. So the immutability of the blockchain together with the shared properties and the taking out of the middleman, that's what gives it its power.
No, that's amazing. So I just want to make sure the listeners understand it really clearly. So blockchain is basically 3 components. The first part is the database, in which you're referring to like Google Docs, and that is shared amongst many, many people at real time and they have a single view. The second piece is the assets, which it could be the Bitcoin or some sort of cryptocurrency or whatever it is that the actual asset is. And the third component is about the security.
Yeah, I think you have it. So you have, a series of transactions that are added to the ledger. And you could analogize that to a Google Doc. And then you've got these, the tracking of some asset. So you're tracking movements of, and, it could be something physical. It could be something digital. And it could be something like a permission or something along the lines of a certification that you're also tracking as well, too. So, you've nailed it.
Excellent. Well, I got a good teacher here, so that makes the things easier. So out of curiosity, when we talk about assets, everyone talks about Bitcoin. Is there other kinds of assets out there? Or, because I just every time you open up the news, you hear about the Bitcoin prices and the Bitcoin, this. And so now that we understand it's just one type of asset, what are the other types of assets that can be exchanged?
Well, I mean, fiat currency, so actual dollars, can be exchanged. The blockchain could help move cross-border money cross-border, and a lot of the banks are looking at that. Then supply chain companies are actually looking at tracking produce and animals. So especially when you've got international, global supply chains, it becomes very important to be able to track things like, animals across the distribution chain so that if there's a recall, you are able to recall a specific batch rather than just recalling a huge number of products that are distributed. For example, I don't know if you recall, but over Christmas, there was a recall of romaine lettuce in Canada, and I had to throw out my romaine lettuce, and I was kind of miffed, and I thought, well, what if there was blockchain? I mean, really, there was no ability to know where the romaine lettuce came from. So basically, anything that was sold in the eastern part of Canada, consumers were told to get rid of it because there was a pretty virulent strain of E. coli that was associated with it. But with blockchain, you would be able to, basically track a pallet of romaine lettuce, know where it was distributed, and know which stores it was sold at. And, depending on the complexity or the sophistication of the store itself, you may even know who it was actually sold to. So that's pretty powerful because now, you go from pretty much like thousands or hundreds of thousands of, lettuce thrown out to maybe, 1,000. And that's, to me, it's like the power of the blockchain.
No, that's amazing. I really like the example about the romaine lettuce. Listening to this, I'm realizing that blockchain is going to potentially impact every industry. Is that correct?
Oh, for sure. Like, I think, right now, I think fintech was ahead. They came to the game early. I think part of the concern was, I think cryptocurrencies were going to replace traditional currencies, and there was a fear, and they got into the game early. And I think that was great because they've definitely done a lot to both move the technology forward and legitimize it. And but now I think the move is that it's actually, we're going to find use cases outside of finance. And so supply chain is one, that I touched on where we're going to see that a lot. The other industry that we're going to see that a lot is healthcare. So the blockchain is perfect for handling data securely. And, healthcare records, there's a lot of sensitivity around sharing that data. But really, with medical advances, we really do need to share that data. So sharing that data securely is really great for both just optimizing and, making sure that we're able to distribute health services efficiently to patients, and then also for patients to just be able to manage their records across the system. So, I think that's going to be a very powerful way to do it. That we're going to see it in the evidentiary context. I think a lot of governments are getting in on this because, the fact that it's you're able to provide people visibility on their records while ensuring that they're not tampered with is very powerful. So everything from the marijuana supply in Canada the Canadian government is investigating how to use blockchain to track medical marijuana distribution, to showing how grants and funding is provided to certain constituents.
No, that's amazing. So that's really crazy. So it can really hit almost and disrupt every type of industry.
Pretty much. I mean, when I started to think about this a while ago, I came up with about 30 to 40 applications across very, very different industries. And it just kind of blew me away. It's not just cryptocurrencies, and it's more than that. It's basically the next step of the evolution of the internet. It's going to be a huge step.
No, that sounds amazing. So everyone around the world is talking about blockchain. Is there a big difference between the global blockchain trends versus Canadian blockchain trends? Like, what exactly are all the global blockchain trends?
So, I think I mentioned fintech. Right now, there's a lot of concern with know your clients and anti-money laundering legislation. And many of the banks take a look at how blockchain can be used for that. So, initially, the example that I spoke about first was just transferring money. So that's a little different. Compliance with those anti-money laundering checks is very time intensive and inefficient and affects all of us. So every time you make a transfer of over $10,000, the money is held because the bank has to verify the transaction. However, when you have blockchain, you can have a single ledger that all the banks can share this data on identity and basically whether the person a sound actor in that system. So I think that's going to help. There's insurance. It has blockchain again has the ability to change the status quo. One powerful facet of blockchain that I didn't talk about is smart contracts. And smart contracts are a piece of code that run on the blockchain that automatically execute when certain things are met. So, for example, going back to where you were providing the bag to me, we had that sale. And what I would say is, with a smart contract, the smart contract could take care of it. The smart contract could maybe take a look at when Canada Post go out to the Canada Post database, take a look at when the bag was delivered, and automatically send the funds to me rather than have someone else, some middleman, take care of it. So the smart contract in the insurance industry is going to be very powerful because, we can automatically distribute funds when certain things are met. And then I spoke about healthcare. There were two, and I think we're very proud of our healthcare system. The Health Canada, who's our regulator for drug and medical devices, is taking a look at blockchain, and that can be very powerful. I know, for example, like medical device recalls, using the blockchain to implement that would be fantastic and a very powerful novel use. I heard inklings of this discussion, but where I think Canada, for a small country, relatively speaking, has a very strong presence in the blockchain industry. I mean, we couldn't get away with talking about this without mentioning that one of the co-founders of the Ethereum platform is Vitalik Buterin, and he is a graduate of the University of Waterloo, and he works out of Toronto. That's a heavy hitter right here in Toronto. And we've got a lot of, healthcare is going to be a trend to watch. Canada, surprisingly, is also very, very prevalent in the mining space. So we didn't really talk about mining. When an asset is sent across the network, the blockchain network, one of the things that has to happen is that the transaction has to be verified and the block sealed, and participants in the network mine these transactions. And because they're providing computing power, they're rewarded with a Bitcoin or Ether or some type of cryptocurrency, like some kind of digital reward. And that's, as the blockchains have grown, people have started to form groups called miners. There are quite in Canada because of its cheaper electricity in some places, and just, I guess, the technology power is actually facilitating a number of mining startups. So that's something that we're seeing quite a trend in Canada as well.
That is really interesting. I had no idea. So what exactly, out of all the things that you talked about, what exactly excites you most about this industry?
I think what I like about this industry is the fact that it's a bleeding edge technology. It's got a very passionate base right now, very interested in sharing the learnings. And I think it really has the power to transform the world. Not to sound cliched, but I really do think it's very powerful. One of the things that I like, and coming back to the money transfer, when we're transferring money from Canada to the US, it's not that difficult to do. But when you're talking about corridors where in war-torn countries or countries where it's a little harder to do, the cost of doing that transaction are sometimes prohibitive, and sometimes you really have to get the money over, especially when you've got a natural disaster. And so, the power of the blockchain, the fact that, it crosses borders, it allows anyone with a cell phone or internet connection to access the blockchain. It provides a democracy, and it's going to open up borders, open up markets across the borders. I mean, the internet took us part way, and I think the blockchain will take us the rest of the way. And, I don't typically quote from people, but there was something that somewhat a consensus said. Yeah, I think it was Brad Siegel. And it stuck with me because I really love it. I love this intermeshing of technology, cool technology that has this transformative power. And he said, it's cool that Bitcoin is skyrocketing, but we need to be talking about issues like self-sovereign identity, the 2 billion unbanked people in the world, and how we can open up new markets to include people in the economy. And it's the global economy. So it really has a transformative power. It's what we saw with the advent of the internet, where people we're able to open up communications from diverse parts of the world. And I think now we're doing the next step. We're allowing people to take part in the global economy.
Oh, that sounds amazing. That sounds brilliant. So tell me something. What tips do you have for businesses regarding blockchain trends? Like, what should they be paying attention to? Like those small, medium-sized businesses, large businesses, like what should they be really thinking about when they're kind of scaling their own businesses?
You know, one of the things that I find is it's a little, not disappointing, but I was a little taken aback that it's a lot of enterprises have formed syndicates to take a look at blockchain applications, and it hasn't been implemented as fast as I thought it would be. And I think part of the reason is that when you're looking at a very large corporation, and I know you could relate to this from because of your background in IT, the infrastructure across that organization could be very diverse. There could be legacy systems. And it's very hard to, think of a centralized a distributed system within the organization, let alone a distributed system that's tied outside the organization. You've got all these pieces, and how do you put them in? And I think one of the key advances in the blockchain space is middleware. So that will allow a company to not directly tie its systems to the blockchain, but use middleware to access it. So if, for example, going back to the recall, it's sometimes a little difficult for like smaller stores who may not have the sophistication or may have like really old system track purchases and supply to tie into like a very sophisticated blockchain application developed by Walmart. But with middleware, it will allow them to integrate and to pull data out from the blockchain so that they can use this data to track and see recalls and to help their customers and pass savings on to their customers, hopefully. So that's one of the things that I think, middleware is something that, enterprises or organizations that are looking to implement blockchain solutions should take a look at. And, there's fantastic companies like TIPCO that are putting middleware out there for these companies to utilize. And then that would be my takeaway, or, I think that would be very helpful for organizations who are looking at blockchain to look at. And then for smaller companies, I would say, I know startups are crazy. It's hard to implement good practices with regards to IP and code audits. But as someone who's been involved in the sale, eventual sale or like financing of small companies, I have to say it's so important to start off from the ground to have these practices built in place. So have a policy on open source software. Like, how are you going to utilize open source software? Because blockchain is code, and eventually you want to either sell that code or obtain more money so you can grow your business. And people are going to look at your asset and want to know how much it's valued. And if you have the wrong type of open source code, which requires you to maybe distribute parts of your software for free, that's not going to make your investors or your purchasers very happy. So, take a look at your code, have policies in place so that your developers know how to, what code to avoid or how to implement the usage or of certain code. The other thing I would say is look at patent strategy. It's, people are, when you say patent strategy, it may be a little daunting because you're in the weeds right now. You're trying to get a product out that you can sell. And, it's more talk with lawyers, patents. But really, all the bigger companies are doing this. Like blockchain patents filings have exploded over the last 2 years, and patents are a very neat way to secure your investment in your technology. It also, if you go a step further and you do the exercise of, deciding like how to strategize your patent filings, it forces you to take a look at what your competitors are doing, where you'd intend to be in the space, and try to capture all of that value so that you can tell someone, look, this is my technology. You're not allowed to use it without a license. And, ultimately that helps you get a better price or get better investment. So it only helps you in the long run.
No, this is amazing. I love this. It's like, so build the capability, even if you're not going to use the capability right now, but make sure you build it inside of your plan so that when it does get moving, you can actually be able to expand and take advantage of that competitive advantage. That is fantastic advice out there and really applicable. Do you have any other like lessons learned or tips for those that, especially individuals that want to get into the blockchain industry and get that experience? Do you have any ideas, like tips, advice?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we touched on is that this is very complex technology. People sometimes are a little taken aback by it because there's a lot of math. Really, math is not scary. It's the middleman in the system. So we have to get comfortable with math. But, and the way I would suggest someone do this is, I mentioned that this is a very passionate industry. There's lots of podcasts, lots of YouTube videos, there are meetups. People want to share their learnings and want to learn from people, and people are excited to share and engage with people. So go out there, look at podcasts. And again, I would like for people to like math. It's not that daunting. There are some really good in-depth books that are primers on blockchain, and they also have very simple code examples that show you how these cryptographic hashes work. And it's really cool. Like you punch in a little line like "Hello World," and you see how that would be hashed, and it's fun. You can play with it. You can get your 5-year-old to play with it. It's a really fun, cool thing to do, and really you don't have to have a lot of just some basic understanding of how computers work. They're very, people, like I said, people really want to get everyone on board. So it helps for proponents of blockchain to share their learnings. And there's a lot of learnings out there. And then again, talk to people in the industry, go to conferences. There are lots of good conferences out there. Some of them are paid, some of them are free. And it's just a good way of knowing what's happening in your city or, in your country, and just learning where people are playing in the space.
Well, Laila, first of all, I'm a CPA and I love math. I love numbers beyond belief. It's how I know how to tell a story and be able to kind of sequentially figure things out. So I'm with you. I think everyone should not be scared of math and numbers and everything else. And Laila, you really are a fascinating person, because one thing that we did not touch upon that you and I had a brief conversation about is that you are actually speaking at an event in London, right?
That's right. So I'm going to be returning to my hometown to speak on blockchain contracts, which I think are really, really cool. And, I'm very excited to be at the Global Blockchain Expo. It's in April, the 18th and 19th. So again, that would be an example of a very good conference for people to go to. And it's, looking at the roster of speakers, there are some really great speakers from all over the world. And, there's diverse things. I think there's the Swedish land registrar is going to be speaking, and then you've got all these people talking about ICOs and ITOs, which are the initial coin offerings and initial token offerings, and it'll be a very cool event.
Well, that's going to be amazing. I can't wait to hear the updates from that. So now let's get to know you a bit more as a person. Like, how did you kind of, get into all the space and this mindset and become now a thought leader on a global stage at conferences? So do you have any kind of key business philosophies or favorite quote? Something that kind of creates that eureka moment, helps you stay focused in this crazy kind of blockchain world?
Well, it's not very sophisticated, and it's something that I call actually the CSI motto, but it's how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And I don't think that Harvard Business Law has written a paper on that. I'm pretty sure they haven't, but it's something that helped me because, like I mentioned, my background is in software development. And, I remember I had this crazy implementation to do, and I think I had the deer in the headlights look. And my mentor looked at me and he said, he basically he provided that sound bite. And that particular elephant took about 36 hours to eat. But, it was done. And had it not been done, I think it would have been really bad. It was an implementation in a refinery control system. So they would not have been shipping out any fuel, which is not good. And, you never want everyone from the company CEO to the operator looking at you, asking you, when is the system going to start up? But it did start up. And, even again, with blockchain, it's a very complex and it's changing all the time. And, sometimes I look at it and I've got maybe 20 or 30 articles that have flooded my inbox that I have to read to keep up with it. And, I just remind myself, how do you eat an elephant? And one bite at a time. And that's pretty much how I go. So that's it.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So is there a popular productivity tool that you use?
I've played around with a lot of tools and I keep coming back to the Excel spreadsheet. I think I'm old school there. I have macros. I like the data tools that they have. I tend to be pretty intensive. I like lots of data and I like to see it all in one spot, and I like to be able to analyze it. So I haven't changed from, I have some of my own macros that I use in Excel, but that's how I track any team activities or my own personal productivity. But there are other cool applications that I've used, Trello and Slack, but for some reason I keep coming back to Excel.
Which is funny because I thought you were going to say Google Sheets at least.
No.
And is there a business book or a podcast or a video, something that you kind of really resonated with you or something that you're currently reading?
Yeah, so I'm actually reading, a book called Blockchain Applications. It's, it's developed it was published by Packet, and the gentleman who wrote it is Narayan Prushti. And he's a really young guy in Dubai who's doing some cool things with blockchain. And like I mentioned, I actually like, actually tinkering with the code and building, sample applications just so I can really understand how the technology works, because I like to get my hands dirty with this. And that I found was a really good book if someone is interested in learning about how to develop blockchain applications. And then podcasts, I find them invaluable. Great, because if you're running an errand or you're in the gym, it's just a way to really digest a lot of information in a short space of time. And, unfortunately, time is at a premium. So, it's one of those things that truly allows you to multitask, because there's only so many hours in the day, but you have to keep up with the pace of technology.
I totally agree. I'm a podcast junkie myself, and I actually am an avid reader, a big, huge user of the Toronto Public Library. So tell me something. Is there a personal habit that helps you stay productive? How do you manage it all?
One of the things I like to do, and this was a bit of a shift for me, was I'm an early riser. So I'd get up, have a coffee, and I would, plan my day. And then I read an article, somehow the gentleman's name escapes me, but he said that was actually a poor use of time. You really should be planning your day the night before, so when you get up in the morning, you hit the ground running. And it's really true. I found that little shift makes a huge difference, because, even that half an hour or 45 minutes that I spend, checking emails, planning my day, that is time that's pretty quiet if you wake up at 6 o'clock, because you generally won't have any clients or colleague emails going back and forth that require responses immediately. So now I've learned to shift. So the last thing I do before I log off is I generate my to-do list, and regardless of what hit my email box in the night, I try to be true to that email list, because, there's certain things that I put on that email list that I really have to be done in the morning. Otherwise, it just won't get done once the day gets started.
Excellent. And is there a favorite Canadian hotspot, restaurant, city, town, festival, anything that you recommend? Because we have a lot of international listeners, so I'm all about highlighting some great Canadian areas of focus.
I personally love the French River area. So it's close to Sudbury, and I like fishing. So we, during the summer, I will generally go with friends and family to French River at least a couple of times. It's spectacularly beautiful. The waterway was used by French voyageurs hundreds of years ago, and it's this real sense of history. It's unspoiled when you're on the canoe, and you can actually feel that you've stepped back in time. And if you're lucky enough to spot a bear in the mist, that just adds to the whole mystery of this place.
And then you'd be able to have the real, true Canadian experience.
Real, true Canadian experience. And, the nice thing is that there's a couple of very nice fishing lodges there. So if you're not into roughing it, you can always have a great meal. There's lots of great companies. There's a great restaurant at a place called Pine Cove Inn Pine Cove Lodge that I definitely recommend.
Perfect. And finally, Laila, how can our listeners connect with you?
You can email is best. You can, if you have a question about blockchain or anything else that I've spoken about, I'd be more than happy to engage with them. My email address is lpaszti, so LPASZTI at gtclawgroup.com.
Excellent. I'll make sure I put that in the show notes for everyone so that they don't have to look too far. Laila, seriously, this was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for the 411 on blockchain and breaking it down into easy, digestible things. And I am really looking forward to hearing about your conference and hearing what else you have. So we'll have to get you back on the podcast for sure.
Thank you so much, Swapna. It's a pleasure. And, I am very honored to be on your show. I know the luminaries that you've had previously, like a personal hero of mine, Anthony Lacavera. So very excited, and thank you for the opportunity.
Cheers. Great. Thank you, innovators, for joining us this week. Our Facebook page is moving and growing each week, so please join us. I post a lot of interesting articles about Canadian innovation trends, the movers, the shakers, plus things that I think are just funny. And if you know any Canadian innovators that should be featured, drop us a line. I love getting feedback and hearing from everyone. You can contact me on email, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and of course, hint, hint, even in the review. I'm still channeling Gary P, that ratings and reviews are my oxygen. And remember, this is our podcast. I look forward to hearing and chatting with you next week.